Today on the show, strategy plus action equals a scientific approach to consulting. Success in business and life is a constant back and forth of charting your course and taking the consistent steps every day to move you forward. Both are critical. My guests on this show range from hardworking entrepreneurs starting from scratch to visionary leaders of cutting-edge companies looking to scale. I help you understand the strategies that are working for them and the actions you can take to model their success. For me, a show like this is all about joining forces with my guests to dig deep and create something new for you. Whether that's a small insight to get you unstuck or a path of massive growth through customized marketing and creative sales initiatives. Welcome to Strategy in Action. Welcome to the show. Jason Kraft here. We're talking to Don Schmincke today, and his specialty is fairly unique. You know, from a quick glance, you think, oh, a business consultant goes in, helps CEOs, helps organizations change and improve, et cetera, et cetera. When you take just a little bit deeper dive, even past the books he's authored and how, you know, the speaking engagements he goes and does, it's really his approach to going into these organizations that is truly unique. You see, Don comes from the, scientific research, educational background of things from MIT, Johns Hopkins, and he's taken this approach to business that dates back hundreds of years, right? And getting to the biology, the psychology, the inner workings of humans and why they do things and how to get them to do them better. He takes that approach when he goes in and helps organizations. Getting past the typical strategy session that companies often go through, which is, immediately just jumping into tactics rather than zooming out and not just looking at the company overall, but looking at their marketplace, looking at competitors you hadn't thought of before, and really crafting a strategy around that then you can go and apply these tactics that maybe other business books, other consultants, other folks, have people rally around. But until you have that strategy right, none of the tactics are going to work long term. So that's what we dig into today with Don, is really that very different approach to consulting, to helping organizations, thrive and not just feel better about having someone brought in and put a new mission statement on the wall, but actually turn that improvement into tangible data, increased sales, increased market cap, etc. So let's jump in with Don Schmincke. Welcome to Strategy in Action, everyone. Don Schmincke, how are you, sir?
Good, thank you.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. This is fun. I had your assistant actually reached out, and you weren't on my radar before, and I'm so glad that she did, because once I started digging and going down that rabbit hole of what you've got going on, I was like, oh yes, please jump on. Let's have Don on the show. And I really want to. There's so much I want to dig in and so much we can dig in, but I really want to focus us around this unique approach to how you help companies transform, that is very clearly not the norm, right? I mean, even though you have a very, same old background, what is it? Physicist, scientist turned business consultant, like everyone has, right? I want to tee you up here a little bit to give us a little bit about that background, but I really want to dig into this, honestly, this scientific approach to business that you have going on. So give us a little bit of background, though. I want to make sure that we have some geography and some context here where you come from.
Sure, yeah, because I'm not supposed to be here. It was an accident. I was a planetary physicist at MIT, and I was, doing some, rocket design stuff for nuclear missiles and working at the Harvard MIT biomedical lab, automating that. So I was getting in a lot of different scientific and engineering applications. But I ended up at Johns Hopkins doing my graduate work there. And then I ended up teaching there in the graduate school. And I got exposed to a lot of managers in the MBA programs. And interestingly enough, what attracted me were their complaints about these best-selling theories or these high power consultants coming in and feeling like there's damage or they were being ruined, their companies were being negatively impacted. And I was curious as to why that was, because a lot of the theories that they were using seemed sound, but I wasn't sure why the failure rates were so high. So I started this experimental CEO group, and they began to give me a way to access it. So what we did is we started using anthropology and evolutionary genetics and evolutionary psychology to understand what is it that isn't working. And I actually went back in time, and I wasn't sure where I was going to go with this. It just sort of happened by accident. And Oxford University gave me permission to use an ancient training manual for managers 700 years ago for training samurai. And I published it. I thought it was a short book for an academic contribution, but it went off into like over a dozen languages. Next thing you know, I'm being asked to speak, and then I realized I must be onto something. So that's how I got here. It was engineering and science background, running into some CEOs and executives who were complaining about what was happening, and then diving into it because they challenged me. They said, look, could this be biological? Could it be something about our species? Could it be ancient? And they were right. It was actually that. And so that's where all of our models happened. And as we began applying it, everybody's got a great idea, right? And a new book and a new theory, but you want to be able to see sales double or triple or go up 10 times. You want to be able to see organizational performance improve, by magnitudes. And a lot of these theories weren't producing that. So when we started figuring what was missing and fixing it, that's exactly what happened. Sales went up, performance improved. And so we funded more research, and we've been doing that ever since. So I kind of got really involved by just CEOs pulling me into it. I didn't really expect to be here.
That's great. Where was that leap, though? I guess give us some context around the specific problems, right? It wasn't necessarily, oh, my supply chain, and then anthropology fixes that, right? It was some human, I'm imagining, complaints and issues, correct? It kind of made that leap to, okay, let's get into biology, psychology, all of that.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what it was. They were complaining about humans. It all became an area of leadership. In other words, people were, why are my projects not executing fast enough? Why do I not have sustainable competitive advantage in the market? Why is infighting in politics fragmenting my culture? Things like that. It was a matter of like strategic development and figuring out how to get humans to do it, and then how to get them to execute it. And that led us into a number of things like, why do things take too long? Why are politics so intensive in some companies where it sucks half the energy out of the business? Why is it successful companies, they publish books about them and then all of a sudden they fail? Why do companies copy what another company is doing, or copy a best practice or some latest greatest theory, and it doesn't work? I mean, these were the things that they were struggling with. And so anytime we saw that pain and suffering, we began to focus on it to figure out what was happening. And so that was really it. It was just complaints that weren't anything unusual. It was, a lot of it was the basis for creating like the television show The Office, right? That people think is a comedy, but no, it's a documentary.
Right. If you spend any time in corporate, yeah.
Exactly. There was a reason it was a hit show, because I see that. Yeah, I have experienced that.
So where's the leap, I guess, from figuring out these issues, not only the why, like why is this happening, and then you dig into each one, and it comes back to a human issue, right?
Yeah.
And then it sounds like through a lot of the research that you've done, you figure out the why, but then what are some, like, what do you do about it? Great, we understand why humans act this way. Then what's that first approach that you took to say, here's how we sort of fix that or tweak it or use what we know to make these systems around it better?
We started with strategy. A lot of people were complaining that their sales weren't growing. They didn't feel they had a competitive position in the market, or they were being outmaneuvered by a new young upstart or a new entrant coming in to the business. So we started looking at strategic planning, and then we went to the scholarly research. We found out that most strategic planning was failing. So we thought, well, that's interesting. Why is it failing? And so we started doing autopsies and found out that most strategic plans weren't really strategic. So that was the first clue, is like, wow, we're producing. And I began teaching strategy at Johns Hopkins in the level there. So I had access to all the top, books and research. And I began to think, why is it that most strategic plans aren't strategic? And why is it they're not executing? And so a lot of CEOs were really interested in the answer to that question as well. And so that was one of the first areas. And what we found out was that the reason tactics seem to emerge is because we use a lot of analysis and strategy. And I was part of the problem, because guess what? I was using the textbooks and I was teaching analysis. Whereas the reason that some companies, that, like, there's always that one company, right, that violates all expert opinion, violates the thought leaders, violates best practices, and somehow they rise up and dominate the market in incredible ways. I mean, like total domination. And I was curious, how does a company that do that by violating everything we teach? And it turned out that it was an ancient insight. I don't know how we forgot it, but intuition is where strategy emerges. Basically, how do you out intuit the enemy? How do you out perceive reality from the enemy? And it's an intuition that allowed these companies to do that. And it's really funny because you see all the experts, all the authors and industry experts, and they're like, oh, this company is never going to make it. And, they're doing all this wrong. And then when the company dominates the market and captures, like, their market capitalization exceeds everyone else by, multiple times, then the experts are like, oh, look what they did right. They did this right, that right. Like, where were you before when you said they were doing it all right? And it's that thing. And I was fascinated by that phenomena. And so what I did, started looking at that. And that's how we realized it's about intuition. And so we started applying it with companies, and we started doing it, and we started seeing the results. That's how sales started growing so much faster. And that's how we could impact industry changes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And I know for me, when I hear that, I think that's completely opposite of a scientific approach of, how do you define that? Right. And that's what, I want to go down several pathways here, but part of that is just from at a high level is, where does that come from? Because obviously it wasn't just somebody going off a hunch, and somebody just thinking like, oh, I'll do this today. But where have you seen that intuition comes from? And then how does an entire organization operate from that?
Yeah, it was, the human evolution of the neocortex allowing creativity and innovation. A lot of that happens to do with shifting our beliefs about reality. And that was one of the ancient models. When we looked at Alexander, Cleopatra, and Gandhi, and Hannibal, and Caesar, and Genghis Khan, we began to see, wow, these people dominated their markets not because they were out analyzing the forces against them, but they were out maneuvering, they were out intuiting. And it was really getting people to follow them, getting to the point of execution you mentioned. people have to. It wasn't the tools that were missing. They all had the tools, and we do too. We have every book has got some tools in it. Here's what you do. Here's how you do it. Here's what you do. Here's how you do it. But the failure rates, which were so high, and this is all published in any literature you find if you type in management theory failure rates on. If you go to Google Scholar, you get like over 4 million hits. So it's not that this is new information, but I was trying to figure out like why it was happening. And the tools are there and they're great. Here's what you do, and here's how you do it. This is every business book published. But the problem is the failure rates of those books were happening because human behavior wasn't changing. Human decision wasn't changing. And we found out that most of the problems in companies is around human decisions being made. In other words, people aren't doing what we were expecting them to do or what we want them to do. And so the key became, how do you get humans to do what you want? I mean, in a sense, that's like a form of leadership, right? So as we went throughout history, we found out that the great CEOs for the past 5,000 years were altering the beliefs of their people. And that's the one course we don't teach, is how to alter the beliefs of humans. But when you shift human belief, you shift their decisions. And when you shift their decisions, now you're executing the way you want. So with strategy, coming back to that point, how do you do it? It really was shifting the belief. So we went back, we had to correlate modern medical and anthropological research with ancient work. So we went back in time, we began to see that it was really very simple. I couldn't believe I missed it, right? And look at the questions our ancestors would ask before battle. Where's the battlefield? Who's the enemy? How do we win? And so the whole thing of strategy was, what does winning mean and how do you do it? And in the how do you do it part, it was like, where are we going? Like, where's the battlefield we want to capture? Who's the threat? Who are the threats there? Who's the enemy? And then how are we going to outmaneuver them? So when we began doing this, we started revolutionizing strategic planning. And then our clients would double, triple, or in some cases, 10 times their sales in just a few years. That's when we knew we were onto something. That when a client hired us, we could actually get those results going. But then we started trying to encourage people to teach it this way and use it this way. And it became a problem because people aren't used to crafting beliefs. They're not used to challenging, okay, you're segmenting your markets this way. Why? Why do you believe your industry segments look like this? And those are the questions. And then why do you think that's your enemy? I mean, what about these other dozen forces that have nothing to do with your competition? So that's what I think starts. It's almost a Socratic dialogue that brings people to these epiphanies, these realizations, these thought reversals. And that's where the power is. But when you look at your average strategic planning session, it's not something like that. So we're trying to change that. We're trying to teach people how to do it differently.
Yeah, and I think to your earlier point too, like people go, even when they're using the language of strategy, and here's what we really need to do is figure out a strategy. It's just like, I mean, it's 0 to 100 to a tactic, right? Like it's like boom, 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 like, oh yeah, and then everyone can get on board because it's tangible, right? Like, oh, yeah, I know how I could do that, and oh, I know I can help do that. And by the end, if you don't have someone like yourself, like someone coming in and going, all right, great tactic, guys. Let's stay up here right now and let's figure this out. Do you have an example, like some because I'm fascinated by this approach and this really going back, how that the way we approach battle applies now in business and all of that stuff. I think it's fantastic. Do you have a kind of a tangible example that you've helped?
Yeah, there's, I can't expose a lot of our client work because it's secret, but I can give you some interesting industry examples that have been published. One company I like to use because they're really well known in the States. Are you based in the U.S.? What country are you in right now?
Yes, the U.S. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Southwest Airlines, and I like to use these examples because even though a lot of companies like DHL and Apple and DuPont, these have used our work. The published work is like Southwest is a good case study, And for instance, when they started, everybody, all the industry experts told the airlines, don't worry about this small Texas airline. They're not going to make it, because they violate all the protocols. But when they ended up capturing the whole market capitalization in their industry, I mean, they exceeded the market cap of the whole airline industry. Then people started looking like, what just happened? And what's interesting is all the airlines try to copy what they did, how they did it, what they did, how they did it, and they all failed. And I was following Southwest. I was giving a speech at the Global Aviation Conference, and they were on stage ahead of me. It was a perfect setup. And the point was, they, like Kelleher, the CEO, was really not out to crush an airline. He was out to crush Greyhound bus. So all the airlines had no clue those were his beliefs. So they had no way to follow. But the whole point is, if we have a bus that goes faster and cheaper, we can capture an entire market of the American economy. And that's what he did. So he didn't really care about airports or airlines. He only knew that, well, we have to have wings on this bus. So I guess we're going to have to park it at the airport place because they got their runway thin. But that was it. The rest were, why do you think why do you think they targeted Greyhound hub cities, not airline hub cities? Why do you think their flight schedules may be Greyhound bus schedules? Why do you think when you get on a Southwest flight, you feel like you're getting on a freaking bus? Because you are, you see. So that's an interesting look at disruption and how that occurs in an industry. And I spent a lot of time with George Stalk, who started the whole lean manufacturing revolution and competing against time 20 years ago. And every couple of weeks, I spend a couple of hours with George. We do a Zoom thing, and we end up comparing notes. It's a fascinating guy. And maybe we'll do some stuff later on. So people that are tracking me, I hope to get some, something online where you can see some videos of me and George as we're bantering about. But one of the interesting things about George is he wrote an article everybody could get if they want to download it at Harvard Business Review on disruption and how to avoid it. And in there, you can kind of see this pattern playing out that companies. He said this to me, and I actually put in my presentation and acknowledged him that he said that a lot of legacy companies, when they're under threat by a disruptive force, tend to respond with legacy responses. And so when Southwest came in as an example, the competition responded, but sort of with the legacy response, their beliefs did not shift. And that's what happens in disruption, I think. That the contender comes in, causes massive disruption because of their different way of believing what they're doing and how to win and how to out into it. But the victims keep responding back with their legacy ways. And we're trying to teach, stop doing that.
Right. Yeah, because you can help an organization on both sides, right? You can help them be that disruptor by changing their beliefs, but then you can help the folks being disrupted to kind of like, here's what's happening. Yeah, that's really strong. That's fascinating. When you go into an organization, like Southwest is a good example, right? There's Herb's approach that he took, and he had this singular vision kind of, aspect.
Yeah.
But what's grown and lasted through there is, and what they're very known for is their culture, right? I don't ever want to fly a Southwest flight because I do feel like I'm getting on a bus, right?
Right.
And yet, I acknowledge every single day the passionate tribe, the good business model. Number one, the passionate tribe of people who work there and evangelize Southwest. I've been through the headquarters. I've talked to the people, got friends who work there.
Yeah.
And he's built this giant thing. But he's done it in this culture because, to your point, the belief there, correct me if I'm wrong, but the belief comes in not only that they can do that and here's the business model and here's how they structure things, but then there's a level of belief throughout the organization, in that leader, that if you can grab that, like that belief in the company's mission, And that's what they've done well. Do you see that as a requirement too? Because it's almost two things. It's almost the belief that the top, the C-suite, the top, person has in terms of their marketplace and what they can do. But then they've got to translate that belief down through their organization.
Yeah.
And then does it also mean a different belief, like believe in us or believe in this thing we're going after? Where do you see that most effectively?
Well, it's funny. When we started fixing the problem with strategy and seeing the dramatic results, we had to then look at, what does execution look like? And, how do you take action? And we found out that the companies that were doing it well throughout thousands of years and today had something, they captured that winning formula. Because you're right, you have to translate, here's how we're going to win. How do you capture that in a way that translates to the whole organization? And we thought, well, okay, we have mission statements, don't we? We have this, we have that. But when I was when I do research in this area, not only am I interacting with some brilliant people who, for some reason, want to interact with me, and we have fun doing it, but I also take expeditions to various remote regions. And I went to a lost civilization in the Himalayas. And for like almost a month, like the king let about 40 of us in, and a dozen of us were an expeditionary team. So we had a month together, and I wanted to study the villages, how they led, because if they're leading like we're leading, that's biological. So I have more evidence. But at the end, the whole team imploded. The American team imploded. And that's what gave me the insight for how to fix this problem, because the key is, why did we always implode at the end? And by the way, expeditions seem to always fail at the end. And it became, we don't have a next pass in front of us. We don't have a formidable challenge where we believe we need each other. And that then gave me the insight that a lot of our company mission statements and why statements and purpose statements they're great. They're nice and motivational, but do they inspire, what I stole from the Vikings, a compelling saga? Do they inspire passion for a challenge ahead that is so great that we need each other to achieve it? And we need to be willing to do two things. These are two things that aren't taught in any, we try to encourage it being taught, but in any institution or internal corporate training programs. And those are the two things that seem to separate winners from losers. And that is, are we willing to suffer and sacrifice together? Which goes totally politically incorrect, because it goes against the happy employee movement. And I'm all for that. But when you see the greatness of companies, people are willing to lock arms and suffer together and sacrifice to achieve that next pass. And that's why we said, you know what? We need compelling sagas. We need something different than just a typical, why or mission or purpose statement. And that really made the difference. So how do you get everyone inspired? You craft a compelling saga so they all know, here's what winning means. It's going to require so much. We have to work together and need each other. And it's not going to be fun. And we're not going to be happy all the time. Some days we're going to have to suffer and sacrifice together. That's a powerful company. That company can take markets.
I like that. So walk me through, we'll have our Acme SaaS startup here, right? That's, for theory, for a hypothetical. How does that, and you've got a leader that buys into it, right? That just, man, this is amazing. I know we need this. We've been flat, for the last 3 quarters. How do they take this approach and infuse their organization with that saga? What's that process?
Well, generally, once we craft the strategy using the techniques I described, and we come up with this compelling saga, then we move into critical success factors. And the whole point is then it gets easier to answer the questions that typically were never really pulled together. But when you have a compelling saga, then it becomes, okay, what culture do we need to implement the saga? So that opens up a whole new set of questions like, what part of our culture will no longer serve us? How do we structure the company? That's a whole nother question. To achieve this compelling saga, are we organized to do that? We need to restructure. Talent, given this new way of winning, this compelling, what talent do we need? How do is this saga enough to attract the right people that we want? And how do we get it out to the market? And then it can get into systems. Do our systems serve us in executing the saga? So that's where the execution part, the taking action part, now gets energized and focused. And a lot of times I've had clients say, you know what, just me understanding what I needed to stop doing was just as valuable as to find out what I needed to start doing. And so that's how we channel it. Once the the winning formula is there and people know what winning means and how they're going to do it, all those tactical questions can now be addressed much more effectively.
Yeah. What are some examples of that you've seen, or the stop doing kind of things that people need to do?
Well, we had one of our clients was a construction company in California, and they were about 40 to 100 million, I guess, around when we first started. This going back 10 years. And then we got them to 400 million, and now we're getting them to $1 billion. So we'd like to do that. We'd like to take a company that, maybe 50 million or 100 million and get them 10 times their size. And in the middle of it, what they had to stop doing was structuring the way they were structuring, because it had gotten them to the point, and it's a construction company, right? So it's top down, different levels, and we've got these guys here doing this, and we've got the estimators doing that, project field people doing this, and marketing doing all that. That's great. But in the end, they weren't resilient. They were just getting too big, because you're more, as a construction company, your most efficient structure is when you got 5 guys in a pickup truck, and you got coffee and you're discussing strategy on the way to the client. And then you're helping each other and you're adapting to problems and new issues. And then you're debriefing on the way back. That's the most efficient. You get 400 people, 1,000 people. Oh, that's gone away. And what happened is then we had them stop being hierarchical. And we implemented an organic structure where people could be allocated to projects or to clients or to markets together in these modules. And then they reported up to more of a central hub, so they could be very organic. And that's what they had to stop being hierarchical. And it worked because COVID hit, and they thought I was a genius for introducing this model before COVID, because then they responded, were more resilient than their competition. And that was a great advantage. But I couldn't take credit for that because I had no freaking idea COVID was going to hit. It's a total coincidence. But again, it's about strategy and adaptation. So that's one example.
Yeah, so it allowed them to. So the very top doesn't have to have their hands in the day to day of everybody throughout.
Right.
You can actually empower those modules. Yeah. That's great. Well, this is fantastic. I love this approach. Just really, that shift in thinking when you go in. Who should reach out to you and get your help? Like where?
Oh, sure.
Who's somebody struggling with this thing or this size of organization, and then how do they do so?
Oh, they can easily reach me. I mean, my email is very simple. It's Don@Saga Leadership, using that Compelling Saga, SAGA leadership.com. And Don@Saga Leadership. And of course, sagaleadership.com takes you to our homepage. And we're adding new things. We're trying to put more online work, like the samurai work. We have a Becoming Samurai program. And we're getting more into other types of scalable online work as well. So stay tuned for that. But that's, we try to put a lot of resources out there. So references, books, like I said, George Stalk and I may be doing some streaming, so that'll become available to you.
Fantastic. And who is it out there that should reach out?
I would say generally we get a lot of contacts from CEOs or executives who are feeling some sort of pain and discomfort, either they're not growing as fast as they want, or there's an internal organizational problem or a team problem that seems to be chronic. You know what I mean? And it's not being fixed by a TED talk and a book to read, or you brought some trainers and coaches in and it just doesn't seem to work. And yeah, or some. So I think it's either people that are in pain or people that are enlightened. Those are our best clients. And by enlightened, I mean, hey, we're on top of our game. We need to keep going. We need to keep pushing. Companies in the middle don't really call us because either they need to fall in one of the other categories eventually for the phone to ring. But we love working. We learn so much from different industries, and I might do a CEO workshop presentation. It's about 3 hours, and it changes every 5 years. I'm always adding new stuff to it. So we're not at the end of the road. We're still making mistakes and learning and growing. And people like you who are out there in the media helping get these ideas out are a big help for us. So I appreciate your support.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for jumping in with us here. This is fantastic. I encourage everybody to go check out Saga Leadership and dig in, see how Don can help. Thanks, Don.
Thanks,
and everyone, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of this show. If you ever need help building out custom strategies for your business or deciding what actions to take next, head over to MediaLeadsCo.com and let's connect. I'll talk to you soon on the next Strategy and Action.